Basit Borsa kanalının kripto köşesine hoş geldiniz. Bugün Serkan sahneyi bana bıraktı sağ olsun. Benim analizlerde, kripto analizlerinde çok fazlaca kullandığım on-chain metrikler var biliyorsunuz ve bu on-chain işinin bence dünyada en iyi yapanlardan bir tanesini konuk alıyoruz bugün. James Jack bizlerle olacak. Çok da uzatmadan direkt söyleşiye geçmek istiyorum. İngilizce bilmeyenler için de zaten altyazı koyacağız. Oradan da konuşmayı takip edebilirsiniz. Yes, I'm so excited to welcome James Jack from checkonchain.com. Hello James, thanks a lot for being here. How are you? How is everything?
G'day, mate. Thanks for having me on, and really well. Although it's very hot down here in Australia, we're having some pretty warm days. So I've got like 3 fans going at the moment to keep me
Oh,
cool.
really? Yeah, I can imagine. James, I've been following you for a long time and I really appreciate your studies. You are doing an amazing job at checkonchain.com. I personally visited every day to understand where the market is going. I want people to hear what you are doing at checkonchain.com. And I also really wonder how interested the Turkish community is in the website and in your news.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one of the things that we've noticed, and this has been a long time. So I spent 3.5 years at the Glassnode with the Glassnode team, and something that we noticed there, and we're also noticing at Check on Chain, is that you folks in Turkey, you love on-chain data. So
Yeah.
for our charting website, which is at the chart section, we've got the United States, which is always number one in this industry, and then Turkey, number two. So you guys love the charts, which is really cool to see. So yeah, I mean, I've been in the on-chain world for almost 6, coming on 7 years now, since late 2018, and it's a fascinating field. It's one of those interesting things where we get to look inside Bitcoin, see what's going on. So Check on Chain was basically a spin-off company. Now that we kind of worked out what these metrics actually do, and that was part of the journey, right? Trying to work out what these tools actually do. So we've spun up our own business, and we have a newsletter, a charting website. And really, our goal is to just help people navigate the market, not traders. We're not really focused on people traders. We don't do buy signals. I think there's too many people doing that. What we try to help is the people who just want to buy and hold, but they want to understand why the market does what it does, the macro flow of things. Should I be worried about this correction, or is this an opportunity? Just trying to navigate what is a volatile and fascinating asset to help people think about the market.
Perfect. So let me ask the first question from on-chain. ETFs have been one of the most topics in cryptoverse from the beginning of this bull cycle. Do you think somehow has affected the on-chain analysis? And if so, what metrics do you believe are most effective?
That's a great question. So the idea is that because all these coins transact in the ETFs, they're not occurring on chain. Now, that's not entirely true because there's still inflows and outflows. So all of the inflows and outflows are still logged on chain. So from that, we can calculate things like average cost basis and all these different dynamics. But the other thing is that this is not new. The ETFs are actually not a new phenomenon. We've had exchanges, which are basically the same thing, right? Coins get deposited and people trade on the inside, but people deposit and withdraw coins all the time. So, what I think is really important to think about, yes, the ETFs, the trading of them happens off chain, but you've got to remember that there's still a lot of coins that are not in the ETFs. They're at about 6% of the total supply, just under at the moment in the ETFs. The other 96% is moving around the standard network. So, in a way, we've seen this before with exchanges, we've seen this before with GBTC. Now we've got the ETFs. What's really important to understand about on chain data is if we survey a population, you don't have to ask everyone what they're doing, right? If you're looking for sentiment, you don't ask everyone. You just ask a big subset of people. And then you say, does their behavior apply elsewhere? So, as an analyst, I will look at the on chain market, which is everything that's not in the ETFs, not on exchanges. I'll look at spot markets. I'll look at the ETFs. I'll look at futures. I'll look at options. And what's really fascinating is that all of these markets, completely separate, but they all speak the exact same language. So the sentiment that you see in ETFs, you will also see in futures, and you will also see in on-chain. And now you start to get a really clear picture when you look at 4 or 5 different parts of the population and they all tell the same story. Thumbs up. You're probably pretty close to the truth.
How about metrics? Do you think any metrics has been affected ETFs?
To be honest, not many. Truly, of the ones that I like to use, right, the MVRVs and the SOPAs, I mean, they just keep working, right? I wake up every day waiting for these things to break, and they just keep working, which is super cool.
Okay, I got it. Speaking of MVRV, when we look at the previous cycles, the extreme levels of these metrics, MVRV Nupal, has been decreasing from cycle to cycle. If I'm not wrong, I think the MVRV peak was around 4 point something in 2017, and it dropped to 3 point something in 2021. Do you expect to see lower number in this cycle?
So
2025 probably.
yeah, no, so it's a good question. So quite often, if we look back, generally speaking, in my analysis, I won't include like the 2013 cycle. I just pretend it doesn't exist because it's too different. And if you
Mhm.
go back to that early era, we got this massive spike. And you've got to remember that back then we didn't have trading view, we didn't have prices, like no one really knew what was going on. So it was very emotionally driven, but like the cost basis was still forming. Like there's a lot of dynamics there. In 2017 and 2021, we did see it kind of peak at lower levels, but you've got to remember that that's only two data points. If you ignore the previous history, we don't, it's kind of two. So this is like the third one, maybe, but maybe not. And so, really, what is MVRV? It's how much unrealized profit or loss there is, right? And why does it peak out around 3 or 4? An MVRV of 3 means that the average coin is up 200%. Now, that's usually enough for people to start selling and taking profits off the table, right? Which creates the sell side, which creates the top. But let's also think about what happened in this. I think this all time high is different. It's the fourth major all time high break. And we have the ETFs, and we've got all this stuff going on in the US politically. I think there's a lot of people who hold Bitcoin who are now realizing you are right and you actually already hold the winning asset. Don't do anything, just hold it. So you're kind of in this world where, like, for me personally, yes, I know people will sell. I know that we might get to like 3 or 4, but there's no reason we can't go higher because everyone just goes, no, I'm not selling, right? And just says, no, you can't have my coins in the price. These kind of things can happen. So we only have two data points. Um, I expect that we will hit resistance, no question. But if we keep having serious demand coming in, there's no hard and fast rule to say we must stop at that level. We probably will, right? We probably will, but we don't have to. So that's the way I like to think about it.
Great. Long-term holders started selling their sets, their coins. Should we worry about it? Or under what circumstances do you think the top could be near?
Yeah, good question. So so there are long-term holders selling, and there's kind of two different buckets I want to put these into. The first one is in the March peak when the ETFs went live and we rallied up to 73. There was a lot of long-term holders selling there as well. Some of it was GBTC, some of it was actual just profit taking, and then we saw quite a bit of it over that like choppy 7-month period where we went sideways. Now, those long-term holders, by and large, came from older coins. 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, like people who've actually true hodlers. This particular time, up to 100,000, a lot of these sellers have been people who bought in that 7 month sideways. So they could be swing traders, they could be hedge funds, they could be people who are rotating into alts. There's all sorts of things going on. But if you think about what that means, like sell side is sell side. It doesn't matter who's doing it, but we're not seeing like the high conviction guys exiting. And at the same time, there's a lot of sell side pressure, and the market's at 95K and holding it. So you're like, you've always got to balance supply and demand. So yes, there are long-term holders selling, but it still looks really, really healthy. Like now in terms of where in the immediate term, let's say like the next 6 months, my general feeling is that we probably do get above 100,000, right, over the next 6 months. I think that's probably going to happen. If we get up to about 130, 120, 150, somewhere in that realm, a lot of on-chain metrics will hit overheated conditions. Now, what does overheated really mean? It basically means that there's a lot of investors who are really in profit. Historically speaking, they're starting to take those profits. We probably get some sell side coming in. So I would be very surprised if we go 120, 150, 200, 500,000, right? I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think that we're probably going to find some kind of resistance between like 120 and 150, right? Somewhere in that region. And then we probably chop around for a while yet. So that's the way I kind of think about it, right? So there's kind of the long-term view, which is that Bitcoin's going up forever. And then there's the medium term view, which is like we're probably going to get up into that range. And then once we get there, we'll see. Is it a bear market? Do we go down 80%? Probably not. Do we go down 40%? Yeah, I can see that. So you kind of got to stay flexible, right? So don't get anchored to things. Just allow the market to do its thing, but kind of pre-think that if it gets up to 150 and it's going vertical, for me personally, I'm probably not going to buy. I'll wait and just see if the market works itself out, and then I'll make my call afterwards.
Got it. So we said long-term holders selling. How about the retailers? With your saying, the people who hear Bitcoin from Uber drivers are coming to the market?
Yeah, good question. So I think that's definitely starting, right? We're seeing things like Ripple through the roof, and like every shitcoin under the sun is starting to move. Now we've got to remember that this is some of it's retail, some of it's also just algorithms, right? Some of these coins start moving, and then all the algorithms fire off like quick buy, buy, buy. So look, it looks like there's certainly retail coming in. The thing with Bitcoin is that obviously, as we know, a lot of retail when they come in, they think that Bitcoin's too expensive, right? Bitcoin's never too expensive. It takes a little while to adjust. I bought my first sats up here at 95K just before this call. So like, I'm like, I don't like that it's at 100,000, but I get it. It's just what it is. But a lot of retail when they come in, they don't think about these things. They go, oh, but Bitcoin's 100,000, but this one's 30 cents, So like, that's the way that they think. We're starting to see that coming in. I think that after what's it been, about 800 days or something like that since FTX blew up, I think it's been about 800 days. That's a long enough time. Generally speaking, the market really starts to warm up. It takes about that long for people to get over the horror of the bear market that was 2022. So I think that we're probably due for like some fresh money coming in. We're also like Bitcoin's a $2 trillion asset now. It was 1 trillion, 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Now it's a 2 trillion. Small money doesn't really move that kind of market. You need big money to come in. So therefore, people start to go down the risk curve. So we're starting to see it, but it's definitely an interesting dynamic. It's obviously starting to get a bit silly.
Speaking of altcoins, do you think that altcoins are having the same value and potential as Bitcoin?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I've held altcoins in the past. I've done a lot of the mental loops. For me personally, I just they don't find them interesting. I don't really know what they deliver, what do they offer to the world. Like the coolest thing that they've done is stable coins. Like truly, I think stable coins are massive. They're going to be a huge part of the world moving forward. Giving everyone around the world access to dollars. It's actually hard for Australians to get US dollars. It's easier to buy Tether, right? So giving the world access to dollars, I think is a real thing. There's a massive demand there. Everything else, I just I don't get it, right? I used Ethereum for many, many years, and I wrote a piece on this, and I kind of documented like, here's all the things that I did. What did I really use Ethereum for? I used it to borrow money to buy more tokens and speculate. I never really used it for anything I'm going to actually like benefit in the real world. It was really just speculation, which is fine. That's a use case. But like, is it changing the world? Probably not. So my like honest assessment is that there probably just isn't much there. I know people speculate on them. Price goes up and down, but do I think that there's like a long-term fundamental case? Not really. I personally, for me, I'm quite happy as being a Bitcoin only. That's really where I think most of the value is. I understand why people buy the other stuff. I get it. It just doesn't interest me at all.
I totally agree with you. But isn't there any specific trend like RWA or AI for altcoins excites you?
No, I mean, I don't understand I don't even understand the connection between AI and crypto. Someone's got to explain that to me. I don't get it. Real world assets. The problem with real world assets. Let's say that I put my house on the blockchain, right? So I've now got a token and I've got the house. Well, if I've got the keys and the deed to the house, what the hell's the token doing? You know what I mean? Like, and if the house burns down, what happens to the token? Or if someone like, is the token holder responsible for fixing the plumbing when it breaks? Like these things just aren't real. Like to me, it just doesn't make any sense. We've seen numerous companies. They even tried it down here in Australia, our stock market. They tried to build a blockchain to like do it for stock trading. It failed. The whole thing failed. I don't get it. I don't know what the connection is between AI and crypto. All I kind of think about if I was AI, right? And the idea is that AI is like infinitely smart and has all the information, I would suspect that it probably wants to be a Bitcoin maximalist as well, because it's probably also going to work out that there's just not that much there. And it's probably going to go, hey, I would rather have sats because then I can buy anything that I need because other people want it. So I suspect that AI, even if it does become sentient, it's probably going to work out that Bitcoin's the answer anyway.
Yeah. From 4-year cycle point of view, we have seen Bitcoin outperform altcoins in the first 3 years of the cycle. And then in the last year or 6 months or something, altcoins outperformed Bitcoin. Do you expect to see something similar in this one?
I wouldn't be surprised because people like to gamble, right? Now, what I will say, and again, remains to be seen, but my instinct, right? My instinct is that this particular cycle is different. And it's a little bit different because we always have Bitcoin dominance at the start. We need to get high enough, and then the money starts to flow down. We don't really have, like, for me, I have done that in the past. I have seen the market cycle go up, and then once Bitcoin gets really high, I don't sell Bitcoin, but I then transfer and I buy with fiat, I buy shitcoins. I don't do that anymore. And like, I think there's a lot of people like me as well. People are just like, I just don't care enough anymore. It's like I've kind of gone through enough cycles that I just don't care. So you're really relying on a lot of new money coming in. Now, I also think that FTX, a lot of people underestimate how bad FTX was. It really destroyed the sentiment of a lot of people. A lot of people got very badly burned in that whole bear market. There were so many things that went wrong. Celsius, FTX, the whole lot. I think lots of retail got quite burned, and they may not come back ever. The other one is that if you hold Bitcoin, you kind of, now with the ETFs that you won. You don't need to sell it. You've actually already got the winning lottery ticket. You don't need to do anything else. You just need to wait and hold. So there's a lot of things where I'm like, I personally think the market is slowly but surely working out that there's Bitcoin and then there's a bunch of speculative crypto. And my instinct is that we probably we'll always see these bursts of, like, Ripple just rips through the roof. But who the hell holds Ripple? You know what I mean? Like, the thing is that if you're not there at the start of these vertical moves, you're going to buy the top. That's how these all play out. So you can't really buy and hold this stuff, right? It really is like a speculation. So in many ways, I think that this alt season is probably going to be harder, faster, and probably much quicker than most people expect. And it'll happen again, right? People will say, oh, shit, I missed alt season. They'll buy the top. And then it will just go down for the next 4 years. And I think it's going to hurt a lot of people once again. So in a way, if I was to summarize, I think the rules of the game are now learned. The rules are these things have no value. Get in, grab the hot potato, and then get rid of it as quickly as possible. And because everyone knows that that's the game, they're going to front run that game. And I just don't know if it's going to be the same. I could be very wrong, but my instinct is that's why people went straight to memes. They're like, I don't need to worry about all the tech and, oh, this L1's new and this one's shinier. It's like, I like the picture. We just went straight to the answer of, like, buy the stupidest thing you can find. I can't help but feel that that's the sign that the market is getting used to, like, it knows the rules. And once you know the rules, the game's it's kind of over.
Yeah, I get it. Another hot topic is MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor. Do you think another bubble story is being written right now?
Oh, this is a fascinating story. How long do you have? I wrote a piece on this 2 weeks ago, I think. I knew very little, right? I obviously understand what Michael Saylor is doing, but I didn't understand, and I hadn't done the mental compute cycles to fully understand it myself. Now, I spent about a week and a half diving pretty deep into what's going on, and I came out of it knowing a lot more than when I started, and still knowing absolutely nothing, because it's a fascinating experiment. It's something between, like, it has Ponzi qualities, right? It looks like a Ponzi scheme, but at the same time, Michael Saylor is doing what I have done personally, which is buy as much Bitcoin as I possibly can via whatever means necessary, right? That's kind of what he's doing. And now he happens to have a different set of tools, right? For me, it's like, oh, I've got to generate more income, or I've got to spend less money, or, I'll put that on debt and then I'll buy this and buy the Bitcoin instead. There's all sorts of things I could do in my own balance sheet. He has access to the $1 trillion bond market, as well as the multi-trillion dollar equity market. So his ability to buy Bitcoin on steroids is something else. Now, he's in a very unique position because he has access to the bond market. He has access to the equity market. He's obviously built a brand. He's been through his first 4-year cycle, so he's been through a winter before. People kind of know that he's serious, right? But at the same time, he's also in a very interesting position because he can't leave this trade. He's just in it now. He can never sell, right? Because if he sells any, no one's going to give him any more money because like the deal is he doesn't sell. So once you're in a trade and you cannot exit, go hard. You know what I mean? Like just go hard. So that's what he's doing. He's going as hard as he possibly can to buy as much as he possibly can. Now, it's a very interesting dynamic because when you look at the stock price, I think about it as like two components. There's the Bitcoin value, and we can measure that, right? We know how much is in the Bitcoin value. And then there's also on top of that, there's like what I call the Saylor premium. And some people call it MNAV, and there's all sorts of other words for it. I just call it Saylor premium because essentially this is the amount that investors are willing to pay over and above the Bitcoin treasury value. Now, Michael Saylor or MicroStrategy as a business, it's no longer about the software, right? The business of MicroStrategy, their job, what they do, what their product is actually volatility. So Bitcoin has a volatility of about 50%. MicroStrategy has a volatility double that, 100%. So what the traders in bond markets and equity markets and whatever else, all these traders love volatility because it means things are moving. If there's no volatility, nothing moves. The stock doesn't go anywhere. So what he's essentially doing is packaging up all that volatility and putting it into an equity or putting it into a convertible debt instrument or putting it into a bond offering. His product is the volatility of his stock price. That's his product. So the Saylor premium is people's expectation, how much they're willing to pay to say, well, are you going to generate more volatility? Because the more volatility you generate, the more people are going to give you money. The more people give you money, the more Bitcoin you can buy. The more Bitcoin you have, the more volatility you can generate. So it's like this crazy flywheel, but it remains to be seen how this performs in a bear market, right? This is going to be like explosive to the upside in a bull, could be scary in a bear, depending on how extreme things get, because a lot of that volatility premium can start to come out. But it's a fascinating experiment, very hard to get your head around. I'm fascinated by it and very interested to see how it plays.
Let me ask you the last question. Actually, you already answered this question pretty much, but for those who didn't buy any Bitcoin yet, do you think it's still right time to buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so the thing with Bitcoin is that you are never too late. And yet at the same time, every single time you go to buy, you always feel late, always. I'm not an advocate for crypto. So personally, I think that most people should probably just buy Bitcoin. Nobody is late because the reality is that we are still growing massively, right? We have gone from $1 trillion to $2 trillion in like 6 weeks. So really quite extraordinary type dynamics. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is vastly superior to gold, right? So gold is an $18 trillion asset. Gold added $6.5 trillion to its market cap this year alone, just this year. If you put Bitcoin, just that increase, 6.5 trillion, Bitcoin's going to be $350,000 a coin, right? So the scale of how much bigger Bitcoin can become and the role that it serves in the world is actually stronger than it's ever been. So the better way to think about it, Bitcoin at $10 was extremely risky. The probability that it goes anywhere is very small. At $1,000, it's still really risky. At 10,000, it's a bit less risky, but it's still, it's kind of all over the place. At 70K, we're now talking about we have ETFs. The risk is starting to come out. At 100K, yes, it's no longer $10. It's not 100, it's not 1,000. But at 100,000, the risk of it going to zero is very, very small. It is now being adopted at an institutional level. It's being adopted in the bond market. This is what Michael Saylor is doing. It's being adopted in so many areas that the risk is actually the smallest it's ever been. So the higher the price goes, the smaller the risk. I mean, obviously within cycles, right? There's too high. Sometimes you can buy too high. This happens. However, the higher that the price goes over time, the safer this asset actually is. Now, of course, if you wait until it's $1 million a coin, right? Which I do think is a very real possibility. Yes, there's going to be very little risk, but also a lot of the gains are gone, right? So there's a monetization pathway. Most gold investors have been waiting for a big move for like 40 years, and they had to wait 40 years for it to go up 40%, right? Bitcoin goes up 40% in an afternoon sometimes. So it's just at a different level of its monetization. Everybody is early. Crypto coins will come and go. It'll happen quickly. But generally speaking, I think Bitcoin is, I use it for my savings account. And over the long term, if I don't need money for a couple of years, Bitcoin's where it goes. And then I just wait.
Thanks a lot, James. It was great chatting with you. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, mate. Thanks for having me on. And for anyone who's interested in kind of learning about the on-chain data, head over to checkonchain.com. You'll find our charting website. Everything is free, so you'll be able to see all the different charts. And if you're interested, you can sign up to our newsletter as well. But mate, thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure, man. Thanks a lot. So see you. Thanks for watching. Bye.